The first thing that we want to start out with for you today is when the committee started getting together and we were talking about themes and what we wanted to highlight, there was a resounding theme that kept coming up was we felt that the things that represented this group the most were two really key words, grace and grit. And I think everyone in this room would agree with that. And then we started really on this journey of meeting with all the past presidents and getting all these really great stories because American Agri-Women has obviously a great history. We've been around for 50 years. And there's a lot of things that we want to try and memorialize and not forget and where we came from in our roots. So if you haven't taken the time, there's some great scrapbooks in the hallway. Make sure you page through some of those. We're working on getting them all scanned in so they'll be available online. You can look at them anytime. You can contribute. You can search for people. But this was a really fun project, and I know there's a lot of past presidents that wish that they could have been here today, but we have a message from two of the first that they wanted to share that we were able to record. And there's likely many people in the audience that don't even know this original story.
Sharon Steffens was our first national coordinator before it became national president. So she was really our first national president. She's going to be 90, and she's amazing. She's had a few falls, so she didn't trust herself to come. But when Kim suggested, well, maybe they could put together a PowerPoint to talk about how AAW started, Sharon had never done a PowerPoint before, but by golly, she was going to do it, and so she created this PowerPoint for her and Connie, who started WSAM, and they did it together. And she was a state legislator in Oregon, and really great. And so Arlene said that her husband, George, said he was the one who came up with the name American Agri-Women. Yeah. And with us today, we have one of our early national officers who was treasurer for several years, Julia Hinther from Oklahoma. And so that is very special to have Julia here.
I am Sharon Steffens, First National Coordinator of American Agri-Women. And with me is Connie Canfield, founder of Women for the Survival of Agriculture in Michigan. I am a city gal who married a third-generation fruit farmer in 1960 and discovered what a wonderful place this was to have a family of 5. I graduated from Western Michigan University in 1958 and got a job teaching elementary music in Grand Rapids, where I met my husband. Sharing a 4-H club with 2 other mothers was a joy. And we also were involved in an active Farm Bureau group. And I helped with the payroll for the farm. Eventually, I became an advocate for agriculture, which led me to local, state, and federal opportunities. In 1984, I was elected clerk, supervisor, and trustee of Alpine Township over 24 years. When I retired in 2000, my son started a farm market, which my husband and I ran. I am now 88, widowed, and still live on the home farm. And my son, Rob, is the farmer, and he has expanded our apple farm business.
And I'm Connie Canfield. Like Sharon, I was not a farm girl. I was not raised on a farm at all. I was 26 years old when I began organizing farm women in Southwest Michigan. Today, I am blessed with 80 years on this planet. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University and trained as a teacher and later as the district bilingual teacher. At the time of organizing WSAM, we farmed 400 acres. We began in April with asparagus, followed by strawberries, raspberries, tart cherries, blueberries, tomatoes, and pickles, and we were very labor intensive. Later, we added soybeans and corn in order to better rotate our crops. At peak production, we farmed 1,000 acres of land. My community organizing skills have since been used to build seasonal farm worker housing here in southwestern Michigan with USDA funding. It's the only facility of its kind in the United States. The young woman that you see in the screen here, where we are protesting cherry prices, the one with the pigtail, the ponytails hanging down, that's me as a 26-year-old.
Michigan is the second most diversified state in the nation, with many special commodities. The west side of Michigan is a fruit and vegetable belt because of its relationship to Lake Michigan, which provides us better frost protection. We are about 30 miles from Lake Michigan. Harvest begins in southwest Michigan and goes north as the crops ripen. Please note the map. We live about 90 miles apart, with Connie south of Kalamazoo and I'm at Grand Rapids. Connie, would you please set the stage for this era?
Yes, this story began in 1971. And keep in mind that we were using landlines, which were often party lines. There were no cell phones, texting didn't exist. Communication on the farm meant driving or walking or riding a horse or using snail mail to contact whomever. In 1971, farm women were in the background of farm organization meetings. We were expected to prepare the snacks or the dessert at the meeting while the men discussed the issues. However, many of these women were helping their husbands by handling the payroll or the books at home. But it was still a man's world out there, and we took care of the children and took care of the household. When we got talking about this, we sent out a news release, and we had a really good reporter who helped us for the first meeting, and it was entitled, "Watch Out, Big Uncle, Farm Wives Take Aim" in 1971. Pictured here are Joyce Shear, Carol Andres, myself, and Suzanne Wicks. We were the first officers of WSAM. This was on the front page of the Herald Palladium, which was the daily source of news for all of southwestern Michigan. The word survival was used in our name because our area was being swamped with negativity about agriculture, from the price of food in the store to the housing of farm labor and to the payment of their wages, to the beginning of what we now know as global trade, world trade. We were bombarded, and we had to tell our story. We organized a meeting of growers' wives to discuss the issues, which included processor prices, the price of food in the stores, farm labor housing, and piece rate issues. Over 100 women attended that first meeting and got involved. Their husbands were fully occupied on their farms, and the women took care of this part of business. In 1973, with a looming nationwide meat boycott performed by misinformed consumers, WSM organized a Saturday meat buyout in a nearby city. The farm women carried educational signs. They purchased over $3,800 worth of meat, completely leaving the meat section empty for the day and educating consumers about what can happen to farmers and consumers when perishable products are boycotted. In the fall of 1973, in the harvest season, WSAM women made plans to picket a juice plant in the southwest area. The juice price at that time always set the floor for the pricing of all apples. They were offering $1 for 100 pounds of apples for the fourth year in a row. And we were picketing for $1.50. The New York Organization of Apple Growers contacted me and asked that we send people to help them support our effort. Laura Heiser, a wonderful speaker, Pat Cohill, a writer, flew to New York to assist them. At the same time, our Michigan Farm Bureau was working with a legislative bill which would enable growers to negotiate with processors. We supported their efforts, and Farm Bureau did.
Pat Cohill writer and farmer who lived in West Central Michigan near Grand Rapids, brought news of this idea to the West Central chapter, and we joined forces. 4 women, Joan Hill, Joanne Tomey, Pat Cohill, and myself, went to the Southwest WSAM meeting and returned home with a goal to join them in a white glove, nonviolent picket of apple processors. We sent a letter to all the farm families telling them what was up, how they would be contacted, and that they needed to wear white gloves, comfortable shoes, and make a sign for a nonviolent picket. When Southwest called and said to start, we all went into action. Each one of us had a responsibility. Mine was to call the growers and tell them when and where we would picket. Someone labeled us the fearsome foursome. Pat handled the media, Joan raised money, and Joanne Tomey contacted legislators. We had over 100 picketers, both men and women, turn out, divided them, and sent half to a second plant in Bailey. This lasted for a few days, and then we held a one-day picket at Gerber Baby Foods further north. We even had one farm wife who came with a baby and a high chair and made her own baby food in front of the plant. Many creative signs were seen.
Between these 2 states, we raised $6.5 million for the apple growers. We had closed processing plants in Michigan and New York for over 10 days. We picketed and Farm Bureau negotiated in both states. At the same time, Michigan Farm Bureau was working with a legislative bill which would enable growers to negotiate with processors. We supported their efforts, and Farm Bureau did the bargaining. We learned the following from these actions when we took these actions. First of all, picketing is not a feasible long-time solution. So WSAM supported a bill Farm Bureau was seeking, is the Michigan National Marketing Bargaining Act. We told our story, we lobbied, we met with legislative leaders and a future governor, and that bill passed. WSAM recognized that we needed to work with both parties, other organizations, and individual farm women to give us all the more leverage in dealing with the government. Our membership included any commodity that was interested, and we learned from each other, and we supported each other. The initial chapter spread to a West Central chapter near Grand Rapids, and later to a state board of WSAM was formed in July of 1974, with Sharon Steffens as our president at that time. In 2017, WSAM changed its name to Michigan Agri-Women.
In 1973, Farm Wife News contacted Connie, requesting that she speak. She suggested Laura Heiser as their keynote speaker for the first National Farm Women's Forum in 1974. WSAM seized the opportunity and contacted farm women's groups anywhere we could find them. We invited them to an additional meeting the morning after the forum to discuss creating a national coalition of farm and ranch women's organizations to work on mutual issues of concern. We asked them to come with the approval of their organization to join a coalition. We had busloads of women from Michigan, exhibits, and sponsored an evening reception on one night of the forum. Over 1,000 women attended, and President Gerald R. Ford sent greetings. He incidentally had been our local congressman. Part of his message is in our statement of purpose. There was excitement in the women who were interested in the coalition, and we met into the late hours of each evening drafting areas of concern. At the coalition meeting, we had 3 speakers: Assistant Secretary of Ag, Corky Larson, a California grape grower, on organized labor, and Sister Thomas Moore Bertels, known as the Farmer's Nun, Coalition or Annihilation.
Coalition meeting was on November 14th, 1974. 4 states were represented that had the permission of their membership to join a coalition: Women for the Survival of Agriculture in Michigan and Washington, then Oregon and Wisconsin Women for Ag. Officers were elected and a statement of purpose with 3 areas of concern were adopted. Those areas of concern covered consumer labeling, on origin, and quality. Government agencies had to seek input from ag industry to prevent ill-advised regulations, and national legislation passed to enable farm workers to choose by secret ballot which union, if any, they wanted to represent them. AAW hosted a chartering meeting on November 13th, 1975 at the Farm Women's Forum in Milwaukee. This would have been the second Farm Women's Forum. At this 1975 meeting, 2 speakers, Donna Sweeney, the organizational specialist, and Dr. Sylvan Whittemer, presented the world food situation. Both speakers were from Michigan State University. Several areas of concern were adopted and officers were elected. Your first officers were Sharon Steffens, a national coordinator. Nancy Schmeidel from Wisconsin was the assistant coordinator. Alice Wiemers from Texas was secretary, and Sharon Knight from Washington was your treasurer. Many other organizations affiliated with AAW, including several commodities. In 2017, WSAM changed its name to Michigan Agri-Women.
Ryman Publications had scheduled a 3rd forum for 1976. However, it was the week of the national elections, and many women objected because they worked the polls. Ryman canceled the forum. Therefore, AAW took the risk and scheduled our first national convention in Kansas City, Missouri, 1976. The theme was working together. It featured a panel of consumer leaders and farm women, speakers on trade, legislation, and labor. The first position papers were adopted and later distributed in Washington, D.C. The officers were the same, except Betty Hamlin of Oregon became secretary. And I, very unexpectedly, was invited to the White House for the signing of the Farm Bill in 1977, when Jimmy Carter was president. This invitation recognized the impact that farm and ranch women were having.
And we had some milestones here. We had Sharon Steffens presenting the gavel to the second national coordinator in 1977. Sister Thomas Moore Bertels of Wisconsin Women for Agriculture, known as the Farmer's Nun, was concerned that power would not be abused. She and the Arrow 7+1 researched and developed this moral compass document, which was unanimously approved at the Green Bay, Wisconsin 1977 convention. This document is called The Call to Power, which is AAW's moral guide as an organization, and it should be reviewed often. Following this document will help keep AAW viable and out of trouble. Rosalind Carter became an honorary member of AAW with the pin presented by Joan Adams, our president, and our second national president of the White House. This is a formal picture. Then a more casual picture. Here they are again, enjoying the moment in the presentation of the pin and the literature. And Jimmy Carter was our president then.
The first voice was professionally published in April 1976. Also, the Voice of the American Agri-Women, the title, was trademarked by Laura Heiser to protect it. I was editor of The Voice until 1981 and also the directories to 1982. In 1975, I had another phone line installed so that our home phone could be available for family and business. It was actually capable of having 3 people on the line, which was new for that time. I pay tribute to the many local women and children who helped me in 1974 and 5 when we typed, mimeographed, and collated a newsletter in my kitchen to connect individuals and organizations.
Another milestone was the estate tax reform effort that began in 1975 and 76. Doris Royal of Nebraska had been working on this issue. AAW joined forces with her to advocate for increasing the tax exemption, modifying the marital deduction, and having farmland assessed at its current use. This eliminated discrimination against farm women in the law and allowed for tax-free transfer between husband and wife upon death. It was repealed in 1981. This is an area that AAW should always monitor.
The American Agri-Women Foundation, which was another milestone, was originally called the AAW Resource Center and created in 1979. It is a 501c3 which defines and enhances AAW's educational commitment and is a non-profit organization. Connie served as president of the foundation in 1990 and 91. The objectives: to create and promote educational materials for teachers and public, provide factual information to the agricultural industry, and initiate and promote educational programming to advance the interests and welfare of agriculture.
Well, these are the lessons that we learned. AAW was formed so that farm women would have a voice and a connection with other farm women. Recall, we were only involved in farm organizations as a server of that coffee and those wonderful homemade desserts in the 60s and early 70s. WSAM and AAW can fully take credit for changing that situation and creating a female voice in farming in the United States. Today, AAW stands on the shoulders of many creative, strong women. We've learned to never give up, never give in, always negotiate, always, and let the farm women tell their story. Feature a farm woman on RFD every chance you can get. I saw one yesterday with 2 little boys, 6 to 8 years of age, and their mother was teaching them how to lead a steer through gates. Wow. Farm women throughout history have done many jobs. Those jobs are inside their homes, outside their homes. You don't get to go home until the work is done. And with all that, even with technology, that remains the same. 3 things we learned as we helped organize other states. We learned to work with all segments of agriculture, not just fruits and vegetables. We learned all segments of agriculture. And we learned to take every opportunity to tell agriculture story. If someone wanted us on to talk, we would send a speaker. And we also learned at that time that we needed both political parties to work together to do the things that was necessary for those of us out in rural America. We needed to tell it like it is, and we needed to tell our own story. I didn't have to know about a dairy farmer. That's the dairy farmer's wife's story to tell. I have my own story. Let the consumer see how complex these issues are. Be creative.
Today, AAW has developed leadership programs with the support of experts. In the spring, AAW sponsors the symposium in Washington, D.C. This event has a legislative and regulatory impact that is valuable and educational for those attending and the groups and individuals that they interact with. They take the position that AAW has approved and bring those concerns to decision makers. This is an important effort, and we encourage AAW members to take advantage of it. We thank you all for what each of you do for your farms and families, AAW, and agriculture. We congratulate AAW, its leadership, individual members, and commodity organizations for surviving 50 years as a volunteer organization. That is truly amazing. From a personal perspective, we believe that God has encouraged us and watched over all of us in AAW. The call to power is the base of our strength in seeking to promote agriculture for the benefit of the American people and the world. Thank you and best wishes to all for a successful convention. Connie Canfield and Sharon Steffens.
So then we asked other past presidents to either talk a little bit or send us something. This originated, I think, from one of our first calls. Mitzi Purdue was really adamant that we do something that her family does every Christmas, which is they do a book and they interview everyone about what it means to be you. So it really got us thinking about what does it mean to be in American Agri-Women and who are we. So we asked for past presidents to submit things, and we're going to go in order. And some of you are here, so we'll ask you to come up as well. But Joan Adams was Oklahoma Women for Agriculture. She lives in Buffalo, Oklahoma. She was president from 1978 to 79. So she submitted to us a golden tribute to American Agri-Women. To all members, past, present, and future, elected leaders, and especially to the founding members who 50 years ago embarked on the remarkable journey of establishing our organization, American Agri-Women, I extend my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you for caring enough and believing enough in our noble cause to put your time, effort, and energy into telling the story of American agriculture to our elected leaders and the consumer. I served as national president of AAW during the late 70s. It was a role I truly cherished, and even today I'm humbled by the opportunity to serve and to be a spokesperson for the incredibly hardworking, intelligent, and determined AAW members. Last March, I'm blessed to share my husband and I celebrated our 73rd wedding anniversary. And for the last 70 years, we worked side by side, desperately trying to make a living on our wheat and cattle operation outside of Buffalo, Oklahoma, a small, very small town at the entrance to the Oklahoma Panhandle. We were among the fortunate ones. We managed to grow and expand despite facing droughts, extreme market fluctuations, and elected leaders who often lacked understanding about the challenges confronting farmers and ranchers across the nation. For many years, my husband and I also ran an insurance business, which is what kept us afloat during the challenging years in agriculture. Those hard years fueled my passion to become involved. I couldn't quite grasp how everything all around us kept going up in price: seed, fertilizer, the cost of simply living, and yet a bushel of wheat sold for about the same price as it had years before. Plus, the price of wheat was also heavily influenced by government policies such as embargoes. Little did I know at the time, women across the U.S., from dairy farmers in Wisconsin to fruit growers in California, had a similar story. And that was our secret to making a difference. We stood in unity as a nonpartisan voice, helping each other tell our stories. We were professional and poised. We were in Washington, D.C., and state capitals advocating for the American farmer, and they listened. There were so many highlights during my term as president. Here are a few I remember well. Being featured in several national newspapers and magazines, meeting with the Australia Agri-Women, meeting with 18 national agriculture organizations, meeting with President Jimmy Carter. We had a separate meeting with Rosalind. She became an AAW member, which we just saw in the PowerPoint. Meeting with Secretary of Agriculture Robert Berglund, meeting with national consumer groups, along with countless meetings with U.S. representatives and senators. As we look to the future, let us continue to stand united, sharing our stories and advocating for the American farmer with the same grit, passion, and determination that has defined American agri-women for the past 50 years. Joan. Yeah. There's a picture. And there are pictures with Joan Adams with her officer team, and then when she's next to the First Lady. Chris, you can read Mitzi's.
Okay, thank you. The next president was Evelyn Landis of North Dakota, and we will be getting a message from Evelyn. She's still living in North Dakota. Mitzi Perdue was the president who followed her from California Women for Agriculture, a rice grower, later becoming a chicken person, yes, which that happened in Washington, D.C., and I won't take time with that story, but of how Mitzi met Frank Perdue at a Farm Women's Forum, or about that time. Many stories we will tell and get recorded at some point. But this is from Mitzi. Reflecting on my time as president of American Agri-Women from 1988 to 1990, I am deeply proud and honored to have been part of an organization that has made such a meaningful impact on our nation's understanding of agriculture. The work of American Agri-Women is crucial, not only for those of us who live and breathe agriculture, but for every American who relies on the food and fiber we produce. What would America look like without 35,000 passionate women who love agriculture, working tirelessly to educate the public on the needs of our industry? We make up less than half of 1% of the population of America, and it is vital that we, as a united voice, continue to speak out and share the importance of agriculture. Without that advocacy, the true value of agriculture risks being overlooked. American Agri-Women has spent decades bridging that knowledge gap, ensuring that our work reaches far beyond the farm, and I am both proud and inspired to see how much has been accomplished. I always cherish this quote from President Eisenhower: "Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield." People in agriculture know this is true. People in urban areas would have only a small idea of the truth of this if we in AAW weren't out advocating for it. Then, okay, here's a picture. Julia, can you see the? So on the left in this picture, and this may have been Hershey Convention. I'm not sure. No, but that is Mitzi. Next to her is Jean Mertz, then Sandy Greiner, then Trina Grabowski, then Ardith, then Sonia, and then Gail McPherson, after whom our fly-in scholarship is named. And then, is that you, Julia, on the end? Oh, Jean Mertz is next to Mitzi. And then another picture of Mitzi, who still has been a cheerleader for us to this day.
Next is Sandy Greiner, Iowa Women in Agriculture, from 1990 to 1991. So Sandy sends her greetings and love. She's been undergoing cancer treatments and appreciates AAW members' thoughts and prayers. She was on a lot of our Zoom calls preparing for this. So after serving as AAW president, Sandy went on to serve in the Iowa House of Representatives and Iowa Senate, serving in Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee chairmanships, and as a leading legislative voice for agriculture in the National Conference of State Legislators. Those commitments kept her from being able to attend AAW meetings for years, but she's been happy to return in recent years and to support AAW through challenging times. She says that AAW is so important to keep strong and is worth our investment of time and support. And I know one thing that we asked her to send in on one of our original Zooms, she had a stack of papers, and she held them up to the screen, and she said, "Look what I found. Can you believe this?" And it was her original loan papers from when she bought the farm with her husband, and it was what she had to fill out for FSA. Anyone ever filled out paperwork for FSA? Correct. But how many of you have filled out paperwork that had questions on it like, do you mend your husband's clothes? It's on there. I saw it with my own eyes. She needs to send that to us so we can put it in a presentation. How big is your garden? How many quarts of tomatoes do you can? How many quarts of corn do you can? It was a very lengthy FSA application filled with those questions. And when we think, for many of us who think about that, and there's plenty of us in the room, can you even imagine? No, absolutely not. And then we're not talking hundreds of years ago. This is just in our rearview mirror. So, but Sandy does send her greetings to everyone, and she really wishes she could have been here today.
And then Trina Grabowski with her husband, Ron, who was with Kubota, and a lot of you met her daughter, Beth, who was here, and it'll be fun to have Kubota host us at their facility in Fort Worth for mid-year. And that's Trina with some Illinois Agri-Women there. And following Trina was Ardith DeWall. I'm going to read a message from Ardith, who is here, thankfully. Ardith served as president in 94 and 95. Those years were so busy, interesting, and gratifying. She attended many affiliate conventions, including Texas Agri-Women, Oregon Women for Agriculture, Illinois Agri-Women, Kansas Agri-Women, and Ardith was the first national president who represented a commodity affiliate. 15 members attended the Leadership Academy sponsored by Ciba Geigy in Greensboro, so that was the beginning of our leadership seminars put on by Syngenta then. Dimensions of Leadership, a workshop for committee chairs, was also well attended at the mid-year meeting in Green Bay. President Clinton convened a national rural conference in Ames, Iowa to discuss ways to improve the economic well-being of rural America. And Ardith was invited to represent AAW and made a statement on behalf of AAW at that meeting. She started the START committees, Strategic Action Response Team, and that continues today and has been such a great network and way for us to organize committees, surface issues, and then develop our policy and position statements. And to monitor issues and concerns and then produce reports for the Voice. The fly-in focused on property rights, land use, food safety reform, water legislation, and the Endangered Species Act, along with the 1995 Farm Bill. We had a display, the AAW display, that was taken to a lot of meetings like the National Association of Conservation Districts Expo in New Orleans. Ardith spoke at the NACD Auxiliary Annual Meeting. The display also was taken to the Sunbelt Ag Expo in Moultrie, Georgia, and many new members were signed up at that point. Various projects were completed at convention. Our AAW activity coloring book with a focus on commodities. And I know there were some copies of the last AAW activity coloring book that was done. New Holland paid for printing of those for many years for us, and they were distributed around the country. If anyone wants copies so that Kim won't have to take them home, but there are some out there, and they're very good. They may be needing a little updating now, but still very relevant. AAW brochure, Issues of Importance to American Agri-Women, and an AAW cookbook, Harvesting American Agriculture, with recipes and agriculture trivia were produced and published. And we launched our website. And then Jean Pettibone from Kansas Agri-Women was the next president in 1996 and 97. And we'll also have a message coming from Jean. She and her husband Dick have left the farm a few years ago. They're both in their 90s, amazing, and they are living in a community for seniors, but very independent living in Colorado, and both of their daughters are within a few miles from them. Carol Ann Gregg, I'll be providing something also, and she was our next president from Penn's Agri-Women, Grove City, Pennsylvania in 98 and 99. And then Alice Detweiler was president from Salem, Oregon, representing Oregon Women for Agriculture in 2000-2001.
It really was a pleasure because actually Oregon Women for Agriculture was the first women's organization, Agri-Women organization, that was not affiliated with a men's group. So we were in 1969. I was at the first meeting that they had with my daughter was 3 months old, and my sister-in-law Marie Jensen was very instrumental, and she got us babysitters and we went. So it was really a privilege to serve as the American Agri-Women president. I told everyone that I always learned so much more than I got more than I ever gave. So they asked me to talk about a highlight, and my first convention that I chaired was in Kissimmee, Florida, and it was an incredible convention. I think the presidents organized that one, and it was called Fields of Promise, Potential of Production Agriculture in the 21st Century. Monsanto has sponsored a wonderful evening. They had just opened in Epcot their science exhibit on GMOs. And that evening we were bused to Epcot and to a special dinner that was in a private dining room. And it was incredible. It was behind the aquarium. So we saw the fish going through and divers in the aquarium, and you could see people through the aquarium looking in. So I don't think they could see us, but it was a wonderful dinner. After dinner, they escorted us to the area at Disney World where they do the fireworks, and we had a special area there with a chocolate extravaganza, and I mean anything chocolate for dessert. It was incredible. And after the fireworks display, the park closes, and another park employee then escorted us to Monsanto's exhibit, and we were able to tour that exhibit after hours with no one else there. So it was really an incredible experience for all of us. In 2001, oh boy, that was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, I was appointed to a FSA, Fruit and Vegetable Ag Technical Advisory Committee, ATAC. Those meetings were held in USDA in Washington, D.C., and I served 2 years. It was a special experience. But my entire 2 years was a special experience. And it was all because I was supported by an incredible group of women. And I wish you much success in the next 50 years.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, next, Kathy Revis. Kathy is from Texas Agri-Women. She was president in 2002 and 2003. She also wanted to be here. It was close. She was almost able to make it. So we're hopeful that for anyone who goes to midyear, you'll get to see her there. But I just had and I know that she'll be submitting something to us, but on the way here, one of the times that I met Kathy early on was, I think it was a Phoenix convention, and you were along as well, Miss Chris Wilson. And of course it was last minute things at a convention, because that never happens. And we needed to print something. We didn't have a hotel that would print anything for us, so it was probably midnight. And we took off in Kathy's fancy pearlized Escalade, and we ended up in a ghetto Walmart. So here's little cute Kathy Revis. You know, she's cute, she's blonde, and she jumps out. I got Chris Wilson. We go into this Walmart. We do not fit in. And there's a lot of people in there. I don't know what they were doing at midnight, but we needed a printer and some paper. And we made it out, and we made it to the parking lot. We didn't talk much on our way out because we realized on the way out we probably shouldn't be here. So on the way here, I packed my printer, and I sent her a text with a picture, and I said, hey, there isn't a ghetto Walmart in Fond du Lac, but if there was, we don't need to go because I brought my printer. And she laughed, and hopefully we will get to see her at mid-year.
It's that we can do this spirit, right? You know, maybe 2 a.m, but we need a printer. We're going to print these reports. And then that printer, what to do with it when you're done. And Kim paid for the printer, and I was flying home. So Sandy Greiner was driving, and she drove the printer to the Manhattan exit on I-70, and I met her and picked it up. I paid Kim back, and I
still have the printer.
And it's in my guest house today. So Carol Marks sent a message, and she was also from Oregon Women for Agriculture, from Rickville, Oregon, and president in 04 and 05. It was an honor to serve as the AAW president, and I treasure the memories of working with intelligent, inspiring women to further issues important to agriculture. It's exciting to see American Agri-Women today, the programs, opportunities, and the members who still inspire with vision and energy. Happy 50th anniversary, American Agri-Women. My heart and prayers are with you always. Carol.
Yvonne. Where is she? Here you are. Come on up. Minnesota.
Thank you. For me, too, it was an honor, and I feel very humble to be able to represent American Agri-Women. It's quite a ride, and you don't understand that until you've been through it. Past presidents will agree with me on that. I jotted down a few notes, and it's kind of like, where do you begin? And so as I was going through things, I'm in the reduce mode in my home, and so I have been throwing papers. I brought some things here that I am not going to return, and my daughters will be very happy. But as I was going through things, I was looking at the issues that have been addressed throughout the year and see if we're still working on them. Energy, oil, forestry, endangered species, such as salmon, the spotted owl. And how about those waters in California with all those little fish that they say are native and really were they? And water rights. So we've learned so much about these issues throughout the years. And I remember when Jackie would come to meetings, talk about water issues. And now I'm saying in Minnesota, they've arrived. And eventually, the issues we talk here, if they haven't come to you, they'll come. Some of the things that I focused on were education. That's my background. And so Ag in the Classroom was very important to me. And I think about Jean Eibendahl, who was the instigator of it with John Block, who was Secretary of Agriculture at that time. And then Ag in the Classroom became a national program. And Laura Tower from California always said, Yvonne, when you're at those Ag in the Classroom meetings, you remind them that American Agri-Women, American Farm Bureau, and the Cattlemen Association were the three organizations that got that program going through the Department of Agriculture. So we are in the very beginning of that program. And I feel very strongly that is where AAW has had the biggest influence throughout our nation, is through all the grassroots people that go into the classroom, into the shopping malls, and wherever to present your stories about agriculture. We have reached millions of people through that program. A couple things that we became active in that time was Carol Chandler from California was visiting with the American Heartland people, which was a TV show which now you see on RFD, and said, American Agri-Women needs to be on the advisory board. And so I was the first representative from American Agri-Women to be on that board. And it was very interesting. And of course, as usual, one of the few women. I was also on the Native Pollinators board, which is funded by Ted Turner, which was an interesting experience. Again, I think I was the only woman on that board. And a lot of you have been in that kind of a situation. And through all of our leadership training that we have had, you learn how to be that active person and bring our point of view, which is always just a little bit different than men. Then, as I was reading through a magazine one day, and they were talking about conventions, why do you go? It said, when you first start going, you go for the education. And then, why do you keep going? It's for the friendship. And that's why so many of us keep returning. And my friends back home cannot understand why I keep going to these meetings. But they don't understand. This is my family. These are my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Next up is Marcy Williams, Ohio Agri-Women.
Thank you. It's been an honor to say that I was president of American Agri-Women, to be in front of all these women, leading them, following them, doing whatever we had to do. I wanted to be at that first meeting in Milwaukee, but I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I was married to a dairy farmer. We had no money and no way to go. So it wasn't until my children were in high school and I didn't need to take them all over the place that I finally saw an article about Ohio Agri-Women and went to that meeting. And at that time, they were starting to promote Ohio having the American Agri-Women Convention in 1990, I believe it was, or 1992. So I was sucked in. So that fall, or no, that spring, I went to mid-year. That fall, I went to Sacramento, California for a convention. And the next spring, I was at the Syngenta training. So I was sucked in from the very beginning. And you have to remember, I wasn't born and raised on a farm. I married my dairy farmer husband and immediately went into culture shock. So these women around here helped me along. And it was a way to find an avenue to explain about agriculture, because I was just driving the tractor on the farm and doing all the dirty work, and I'm going, somebody needs to be promoting this. And that's when I found the group and gave me that chance to be part of agriculture. These members gave me the confidence to go on, and I was chosen as spokesperson for Agriculture by Farm Bureau magazine in 1996 and spoke all over the country. And American Agri-Women was one of the things that I talked about and let other people know about so we could join together and be a force for truth as we have been. I never left a meeting that I didn't take something back to the farm to help our business. And one day, my husband walked in, and as I was explaining what I had learned at convention, he said, "I liked you when you were a lot dumber." He said, "I have to work now to make sure that I can come up with what you're wanting to do." And there was always a theme throughout the time as I was president and before, and continues to be, of putting out the fires presented by the media on how bad agriculture was for the consumer and the environment. AAW did a fine job of getting information to our members for their own use and for articles on food safety. And that's what I would like to see us continue to do, to educate our members so we can go out and be the spokespersons for agriculture. And that was one of the things that I tried to do as president. I remember showcasing our affiliates from our members, and which we did today. And we all learned from what California may have done that another affiliate could go home and do and teach their members and talk to their media and explain things. We educated our members about the different problems within our different industries. I remember the timber ladies, that we had several affiliates with timber, and unfortunately, they've lost their industry and they're no longer a part of American Agri-Women. But we all knew what their problems were, and when we went to Washington, we talked to our elected officials and told them what we knew about agriculture. And I know my Ohioans going, "What are you talking about? You don't have that here." And I'm going, "I know I don't, but my friends in Idaho and my friends in Montana do, and you need to know about what their problems are." And we made ourselves visible, and it was important. From road signs to grocery bags, we had American Agri-Women pictures and logos across the country. We worked with our northern and southern sisters from Canada and Mexico. We had trade mission events within our conventions. And one of our conventions that was held in Niagara Falls, we even went into Canada and had part of our convention there with our members. Our water rights, our timber rights, our farming rights, they're all the problems that we've had through the last few years and are, looks like, continuing to have. But we all work together to correct what regulations were harming our industry. I know as a past president, all of us had 2 full-time jobs and didn't get paid for either one of them. We were president of American Agri-Women, and we had to carry on our works at home as well. So that's something that you should be proud of, the fact, those of us that have served as presidents, that we could do that and make sure that all of our members are educated and know what they need to have to take out to the public and explain to that. The, 0.5% that we are now of our industry, we really need to be the spokespersons for American Agri-Women and agriculture. It was, I know, like Sharon and Connie said, that we all had our problems within the American Agri-Women, the organization. I know my one problem that I had, my secretary vanished, and we couldn't do the directory. I had to rewrite the whole directory myself from top to bottom, which was a good thing in some ways because I got to call all the affiliates and talk to them. And hopefully, well, I think we did bring a couple affiliates back because the people said, well, we haven't been that active, but I think maybe we will now. So that helped. But during all these years of going back and forth and trying to coordinate all the farming and stuff that I had at home and all of you have, we need to remember that this is what we want to do. This is what we want to help our farming, our industry, and our spouses to make sure that agriculture continues. And this organization is so unique and so different from all the other farm women groups. We're a grassroots group that went out like Connie and Sharon did and protested. Now, I'm not too sure any of us want to do that now, but it may come to that maybe we should. You know, we need to stand up for our industry. And it's been such an honor to promote this group, to be a part of this group, and have sisters all over the country. Thank you so much for letting me do that.
Okay, so I followed Marcy. And when Yvonne's picture was up there, the second one in the House Agriculture Committee room, Jean Ibendahl is in that picture with Yvonne. And so Yvonne and I kind of on the same wavelength there. But I was going to mention Jean also, you know, because she's, you know, you're hearing from the past presidents, but there are so many people who've done the work, developed the projects, who have made AAW what it's been over the years. Well, I went to work at the Illinois Department of Agriculture after college. And I got involved in AAW because my boss, then director in Illinois, Jack Block, called me in, introduced me to Jean Ibendahl, who is a retired teacher, who'd written this book, A Pork Primer, and he was a pork producer and knew Jean. And she told him what she was doing. They'd started this Illinois Agri-Women group, part of AAW, and she was really focusing on taking agricultural materials to the classroom. They made up all these packets, took them to all these schools all over Illinois, and she needed some help. And so he told me, do whatever you can to help Jean with this. And so my first assignment was that I would work with the Illinois Agri-Women newsletter editor, and she would send us the newsletter, and the department would print it and mail it out. And that's what we did, and that newsletter editor was Linda Swarzinski. So, you know, all these lifetime friendships that began as long as Jean lived, and today with Linda and so many others. But Jean was the brains behind Ag in the Classroom. No mistake about it. In 1981, Director Block became the Secretary of Agriculture under President Reagan. We went to USDA, and at Jean's behest, the Secretary approved the creation of the Ag in the Classroom program. And he also approved us sponsoring Farm Women's Forums, and so we did that, and the Agri-Women came to DC, and it was wonderful. And Connie Canfield said to me, you were the kid, you know, that they would give these projects to, you know, this assignment to. And so I was young then, right? Yeah. And so I was the kid. And I remember, you know, Evelyn Landis was president during those years, and then Ruby, Carolyn Levins. Carolyn obtained 535 copies of The Farming Game. I don't know how many of you remember The Farming Game, but it was in a box, you know, kind of like Monopoly. It was Monopoly for agriculture. And so we took those 535 boxes to the Hill and distributed them to every congressional and senatorial office. Anybody remember? Yeah. Yes, Julie. Yeah. So lots of projects, and but then I met Ron, and we married and moved back to Kansas, and Jean Mertz became the AAW president and asked me to be her legislative chair. So, you know, my AAW involvement can continue back in Kansas, and she wanted to start the fly-in. And so we did that. Jean started the fly-in. So I would echo that. I think AAW, you know, was so attractive to me in those years when I was working for the Department of Agriculture. You know, the strengths of AAW in our structure, and, you know, with the affiliates and the purpose, you know, a reason, nonpartisan voice for the ag community to the public, the we can do it together motto. My job at USDA was public liaison. I worked with all the different ag groups. And what amazed me about AAW was all the different policy positions that we have, more than any other organization, and how well thought out and researched they are. And while a lot of organizations focus on commodity titles in the Farm Bill, AAW members had decided that they couldn't agree and they weren't going to deal with the specific commodity titles. They were going to focus on the things they agreed on: crop insurance, research, natural resources, property rights, and they had the most thorough positions in so many areas. So I really love that about AAW. And I think AAW has been very successful at state levels, as you've heard with legislation, and at the federal level. And, you know, it doesn't always get done today yet, but 40 plus years ago, it was changed so that FSA recognized the women in the programs. And state taxes, so many areas that AAW, like in Kansas, Kansas Agri-Women were instrumental in getting the land use value approach for property taxes for farmland developed, passed in the legislature. And the other thing that amazes me about AAW is that we've always found ways to bring the next generations in and get people involved. And you see how many young people are here. Now, there is another organization of women in agriculture, and if they were meeting today still, I'm not sure who they are, but if you went, it was all gray hair. And they just aged and didn't succeed in bringing in those younger generations and getting them involved. And so AW has always, been able to do that, and that's so important. And, I would say to our younger members here, you see all these people who've been involved for 40 to 50 years, and there are things like the friendships that keep bringing you back, but there are seasons of life when you're more involved than others. I became vice president for communications under Trina. We had our first child during that term. But later I went to law school and then had triplets. And those were times where I stepped back, and I wasn't at meetings and didn't have jobs. And then Kathy Revis became president, and we had been state presidents at the same time. And I just, respect Kathy so much, and she is so awesome on the policies, and so I told Kathy, even though the triplets weren't very old, I said, gee, if I can help you in any way, let me know. I could be a committee member or something, And she said, well, would you be legislation chair and fly-in chair again? And I'm like, well, So Ron has always been supportive, and the 4 kids and I said, yep, we're going to DC for the fly-in for Kathy. So there are times in your lives when you'll be able to be more active than others, and that's great. Whatever you can do, whenever you can do it, I encourage you to stay involved. Yvonne said something so profound last night, which was, think of all the things we've learned and know how to do that we wouldn't if it hadn't been for AAW. And I think back on all that, and all the things like, you think, we can do this, right? We'll go out in Arizona into some ghetto area in the wee hours, and we'll get this done. Trina, was a big dreamer and taking things on, and she started grant writing. And she had set things up and encouraged me to write a grant for USDA. And we did, as a result of that, the RFD TV show in Marcy's term. And that was great. And so many of our members were involved in telling the policy stories of AAW on that TV show. And I guess, last story I got it. My dad just loved that AAW TV show that we did. We had, with the money we had from USDA, we could do one season, 13 shows. And then they repeated for 2 or 3 years. And he watched them every time. And he would come. And we were dealing with a lot of the same issues we dealt with from the beginning, right? Immigration and ag labor. And so then, we were done, and Dad called me and said, there's a great thing happening. RFDA is going to have a new farm women show. And it was the Ag Her Farmhouse show, and he couldn't wait. And then the first one came on, and he called me and said, never mind, you don't have to watch it, because they don't talk about policy issues like American Agri-Women. So I think, you know, what we've done is really appreciated too by a lot of people in agriculture.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I thought we were supposed to do a movie, so I've got all this stuff for you, but listen, I was impressed with Chris's RFD TV show, and I always thought, well, that'd be a great thing to do. Trent Luce and I talked about having the housewives of farmers across America, like whatever, but we never got into that. But I kind of got into the gifting of the RFD TV because we were still classified a partner with them, and so we got to go to the American rodeo, the first 2 American rodeos that we went to, and set up a booth. And so I'm going to Texas, and my family up in Montana is going to a team roping in Great Falls, which is they've just had blizzards. So I'm taking kind of like lightweight clothing because really I'm going to Texas, right? And it was so cold in Texas, in Dallas, I nearly froze to death. I think Sue McCrum went with me. We went to Walmart. The only thing we could find were garden gloves and whatever to wear. It was just, but anyway, it was great fun. We met a lot of nice people. And so thank you, Chris, for letting us be part of RFD TV. It was great. Yeah, we liked it a lot. Well, the first convention I ever went to, I started when I joined Montana Agri-Women. I had not heard of it before, heard something about on a radio advertisement, come go to this program in Montana. And wow, when I went there, it's like, I can't believe this is really what's going on, because they had a panel discussion of women that told their stories about what's going on with their private property and with the Forest Service and with the BLM. And it's like, this can't be happening. We live under a constitution. We're a free country. That, you know, they're not going by the rules. And so I got sucked in, just like everybody else. I got sucked into this group, and Vicki Bishop was the president, and she said, you need to go to convention. Well, I didn't, we had a business. I don't know how small my girls were, not that small, I guess, anymore. But it's like, I don't usually travel because you spend all your time at work. And it was in North Dakota. I met Yvonne Erickson there. It was like a joint between Minnesota and North Dakota. And I'm from Montana, so you'd think going across North Dakota in November wouldn't be too bad of a deal. But it was a blizzard. And there were like Lisa Henderson and I went, and Vicki Bishop was vice president of communications. What Vicki didn't tell us was that she had 500 envelopes, because there was not email then, that she had to put labels on before she got there so she could send out the press releases. So we're like licking, one of us is driving and one of us is licking envelopes. And there are semis in the ditch on both sides of us. And it was like, wow, that was fun. And then when we got there, it was like John Block spoke. I don't know if you guys remember that. And it was during the spotted owls. And somebody said, well, what about preserving the spotted owls? And I remember he said, you know, if they lived in any other countries, they'd eat the suckers. He said. And I thought, well, he's kind of my man, you know. So, so the whole point is like, not your best friends are not necessarily geographical. They're the ones who you share the most interest with. And when I got to American Agri-Women, it was like, wow, these are my kind of people. And you could share passions with them, and you realized you weren't a man standing alone, that there were more people than you that thought like you did. So, so that was my first experience with American Agri-Women. And I served on, Vicki Bishop was great at assigning things. Like when you go there, you have to speak at the town hall meeting. You know, right away, we got us involved. It's like I'm a nervous wreck trying to figure out what to talk about. And then served on livestock chair, then a start chair. Then I kind of worked my way up, but I was young coming into the organization comparing to all these other women who've been presidents. We didn't start until 1995, and American Agri-Women was then still America's best kept secret. So, but when I became president, I realized how other women hadn't heard about American Agri-Women, and it was my whole goal kind of to establish more affiliates. And so with the help of Chris Wilson and Sue and Linda Brzezinski, we did get some new affiliates started. We traveled around. I did travel to Arizona. That's an almost Agri-Women. But this is the women's mining. Yeah, these are the ones that we worked on when I was president. Colorado Agri-Women, Chris Wilson and Linda Brzezinski did the groundwork on that. Montana Cattle Women joined at that time. Sue and I found North Carolina Cattle Women, or Agri-Women. We went to Oklahoma, met Joan Adams, who had been a previous president. West Virginia Agri-Women, Western Nebraska Agri-Women, the Women's Mining Coalition, and Wyoming. So it was fun, and it was great to meet these people. And I've always kind of maintained that as organizations change, you really need to keep the communication up, because if you don't go visit the people, they don't know who you are. And so it was great fun meeting all of these people. And so I just had a couple pictures of, this is Women's Mining Coalition. I believe they're still affiliates of ours, but we did a reciprocal trade. And it was very interesting because they let me go to their fly-in. Now, I have a red coat on there. Sue has mentioned that several times. One thing that I don't know if younger members remember, but there used to be another organization called WIFE, Women Involved in Farm Economics. They wore red. We're Agri-Women, we wear green, right? So and besides that, my company, Neutralix's colors are green, and one of our big competitors, Lumix, is red. That's about the first time in about 100 years I've ever worn red, and it's still hanging in my closet. So, okay. This is Colorado Agri-Women, and after they became an affiliate, they put on, I think, the next convention. So this is Wyoming. Linda Schiffer's in the background there, and she helped form that group and served as president. North Carolina, is Sue in there? Oh, you took the picture. Yeah, I didn't let her get any of the glory, okay? Arkansas Women for Agriculture. Now this Arkansas group, they have a huge women's conference every year. And they really kind of started and then they fizzled out, but they do their own thing. And I think the only reason they're not really active is because they don't really know who we are. I think it's very important that our affiliates know who we are so that they can continue to be active. Now, the second from the left is Mary Frances Perkins, and she's a rice grower. And so while I was down there, and I have a picture of it, but it's probably not in sequence. You can go ahead. But this is her and I. We were in Washington, D.C. with their Senator Bozeman, who was also on the Ag Committee. This was fun. How many of you remember going to New York and going to Mitzi's for a reception and working on New York? They're not me, but it was right during that time. So I went to New York. The reason I put New York in there is because I got to go to their second annual meeting as president at Long Island, and I was going back, and they have fish on the East Coast, and so I stopped and got some clam chowder, and I'm from Montana, right? This is like, I just had to take a picture of this woman because it's like they go out in public like this, right? Okay, that was it. That was just for, I did not know that woman. But But then, and know, those of you who know Ruth Jensen, she always had things going on, but she invited us to dinner one night when we were in New York, and we couldn't get a taxi. So I'm on another bicycle guy over here, and they're here, and we're going through all the New York taxi, or all the New York traffic, and it was a little sketchy, and it was, so that was just one of the ways we traveled. This is an RFD event. We went to, what was it, Katie? The Senior Pro Golf Tournament. I know nothing about golf, but it was a great event. And we were glad to be the part of it. So American Agri-Women was represented there with Abby Amick, who was my Vice President of Communication, and Katie Yost on the other side. Chris Wilson and I, the first, when you're president, your 2-year term, it's kind of not in the policy, but it's kind of a given that the first year you travel with the past president so they can teach you the ropes. And the second year you travel with your vice president so they can kind of learn the ropes. So there's kind of continuity. And Chris kind of dragged me along. So this is Howard Buffett at the U.S. Farm Forum. I can't remember the name of it, but it's every year. But we were there. So one year I went to, when they just started the 2020, Yvonne Erickson asked me to go and attend the Energy Forum, and I wore my cowboy boots, and that was before cowboy boots were in style. Nobody talked to me. Okay. Go ahead. And these are agri-men. Yvonne and I were always going to start a group of agri-men, and so, because they all come, and they're all part of our convention, and the spouses tours are just as much, I think, a bonding group for them as they are for us women. And this is my husband, George, my son, Ty, on the right, and Daryl, Kinney on the other side. So, yeah, great friendships. And I looked at this, and it's like, he's collecting money for something, but I'm not sure. Did you see this little garter on there? And conventions are always wonderful. This is Chris Ziliox. And we thought she looked just like Rosie the Riveter. We had a sign there, so she was like doing that, and it's just, I guess this to me is a symbol of American Agri-Women. We really can do it, and at convention we just get excited about it, and we can work together on it. And New Orleans. So the years Sue and I traveled together, not counting the bed bugs, but this is New Orleans, and this was Women in Agribusiness, I believe. And we went there, and I think they're still around. But what I found, not really negative about it, excepting for their motives are completely different than agriculture women. Well, this is beignets. What else can you do at New Orleans, right? But the most important reason that I belonged to American Agri-Women is because it touched my heart when they started talking about the issues. And so these are some of the vital issues that were going on about the time of my presidency. And you can see that there are things like, Yvonne said, still things that we're working on again. But you can see that some of the things are immigration, atrazine, endangered species, equal access to justice. The Dirty Dozen foods was like where there were pesticides on apples, this part of the fruit industry. And then it was kind of interesting to visit the Department of Labor during the child regulations proposal that the Obama administration had proposed. And there were so many groups that made their comments public that they withdrew it. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was going to, if your child is working on the farm, they had to comply with all the labor regulations. So I think we made a difference on that one. The horse industry, wilderness, and food safety modernization act. So that was just a sampling of some of the things that we were working on. Getting my husband to Washington, D.C. was probably the major high point of my life, really. And so here we are in Washington, D.C., and I wanted him to see some of the great governmental things, but his very favorite thing were the Segway tours that we took. And we went to the White House. Remember the trip, how many remember the trip to the White House? We got to see Michelle Obama's garden, organic garden, kind of. And that's a Montana delegation to Washington, D.C. Katie Yost, Karen, Christy Pettis, our president, Kelly, and Maggie Howley. A force to be reckoned with. Go ahead. In middle is Eleanor Zimmerlein. She's been a member for years and years, and she just recently passed, and we wrote cards to her. This is the rooftop of the Department of Interior, and we're stranded again. George, we can't come home, George. Our flight was delayed. But the best part about it are the friends we all made, and I think that's what we all kind of decided upon here. And I made a trip over to Maine, and they fed me lobster. Sue and I went over financial statements and had the best time of our life. I did. She didn't, but it was great. And then more friendship. We can just go through these. This is Mary. They took me to their rice farm. This is Mary Perkins and her husband, Mary Frances Perkins and her husband, Gary, and they explained it to me. Friends that we made at Rockefeller, at New York, upstate New York. Sue came to Montana, and we took her on a horseback ride. She's the one on the white horse that the horse has his ears back. This is right before he bucked her off. Okay. And then I turned the rein over to Sue. Thank you. Oh, I do have one more slide that I'd like to, on another note. I just really think it's important that we stay together. And this is my Bible verse, and I'd like us to read it together. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. God was a cowboy because he was spurring us on. Okay.
Sue McCrum, Maine.
Thank you, Karen. I don't need to say much. How can I follow you? It was such a privilege to represent AAW, and I had no intention to climb the ladder towards leadership. One of the first leadership meetings I went to, Alice Detwalder happened to be the president, and she was talking about something I can't remember, and she told me my responsibility was to be the timekeeper. Well, at that meeting, I had brought in little packages with different products of Maine in them, and one of them was a rubber potato, one of those spongy potatoes, and she said, if I get going too long beyond my time limit, just throw that potato at me. Well, she was the national president, and I took her at her word. What I didn't realize, I couldn't hit the side of the barn if I tried to. I threw that potato and caught her right in the side, the forehead? Right, bong, right? I was so totally embarrassed. It was awful. And another thing that got me into this, I said, you have to lean on good friends. When Maine was, the first national meeting I went to was in Nevada. Jackie Comstead ran that meeting all by herself, and I was so impressed. I thought she had poise. The speakers that they had, they were just unbelievable. But Maine was going to host the next year, and we had, I had to film something in Bar Harbor, talk about that and everything, but when we went up to, I don't know, was it the breakfast or the luncheon? The luncheon, and all of a sudden everybody's asking me this and asking me that. What about this? What are you going to do here? And I looked at Karen, who I had just met, and I said, why are they coming to me? And she said, you're running the meeting. And it's like, oh. And then she turned to me and said, you know, you have to open in prayer. And that was the last thing I wanted to thank God for at that time. And she must have seen my look, and she said, I'll do that. And I told her, I said, I'll owe you for life. And she's held me to that. So be very careful about your friends. Another thing, I love seeing you ladies. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leader for getting you here. You are the life of our organization. We have two other gals from Maine, and I appreciate them. The second one of them, this is her second time, so I just encourage you, go home, tell your friends, come back again, because we need you in our organization. The highlights of my leadership, I guess I would say, is the Drive Across America. We did that as a celebration of the 40th anniversary. We took off in Maine. Doris Mold at that time was my vice president, and we went to the very top of Maine. It was a send-off by McCain Foods, and along the way, we headed towards our fly-in in Washington, D.C. We left June 3rd. We went into New York. New York ladies hosted us. We went into New York City. I drove into downtown New York City with that truck on Saturday morning in the pouring rain. And we went to the open market and distributed paraphernalia, told everybody who we were, and drove down the next day to fly-in. And we had that truck, and it was all loaded, and of course it was wrapped. And being in Washington, D.C., I thought maybe it's a good idea we unload this truck and take everything up to the room. Well, it takes about 2 hours to, at that time to fill it back up again. So anyway, we had lots of help, everything went up, and I thought, well, that's great. That was a waste of time. I went down, we drove the truck around D.C., and everybody else had pictures taken with it. When I went to get the truck to fill up the day we left, I guess, for the continuation of the trip, someone had tried to break in the back end, which I hadn't realized it. So my husband happened to be there, so I don't know what he did, but he got it back together again. So all that stuff would have been either taken or destroyed, so I was very grateful for that. But the Drive Across America took us to the 40th anniversary of Ag in the Classroom, and thanks to Jenny, I don't know what string she pulled, but all of a sudden we had red carpet treatment there. She had us sitting right up front, she had us introduced, and we had the opportunity to talk about Jean Eibendahl and that she was really the founder of Ag in the Classroom, and they kind of had forgotten that, hadn't they, Jenny? So I thank Jenny for that, and I don't know who she knows down there, but all of a sudden she was snapping her fingers, and she had the governor and our pickup brought out and around, and the governor there with us to have her picture taken. So I don't know what she does down there, but anyway, she does a great job. So I thank all of you. Raise your hands, those that I stayed and spent the night with. We were hosted throughout. Stand up. You were all part of this drive. We couldn't have done it without you. It was wonderful. I did go into Nebraska, and I was glad Doris Royal was brought up. I had the opportunity to stay at Doris's house and spend some time with her. I hadn't really heard the whole story of what she had gone to, and what a legacy she left. We don't have to worry about that, losing our spouses and what they had gone to prior to her fight for rights as a widow. So I had a great time. We went into Oregon. That was my first stop, and I took a reprieve of 2 weeks. As I said, we picked people up, members along the way. I only had 1 day of driving alone, and that was in Kansas to Colorado. And I had stopped and had lunch with the past president, and Karen came in and joined me. But we made it into Colorado and stayed with, what's your mother's name? Janelle, that'll serve her right for not being here. But I left the truck in Oregon, and Oregon had a great time with that truck. It didn't divulge any secrets at all, Alice, but I think they were in parades and everything else, so it was great. I picked up Arlene in Oregon, and we made our way with many stops down through into Texas. And she stopped at this little jewelry place that I happened to get one of my favorite pieces of jewelry. And we started, she had brought books on tape. After you're driving miles and miles and miles, you're pretty well talked out sometimes. So she started this book on tape. And it was a great book. I can't even remember it now, but. Oh, was it? But anyway, we drove miles and miles and miles. And I drop her off in San Antonio at the airport? Yeah, she was going back there, and what does she do? We have about a half hour left of that tape, and she took it home with her. You know, there are things you remember, I just want you to know. No. But I mean, it was a great opportunity to meet members that had never participated or come to an annual meeting or mid-year meeting or fly in at all. We were running late, about an hour late, kind of forgot the time change between Arizona and New Mexico, remember, Arlene? And we called ahead, and back then you called, and I left messages, nobody was picking up, and I thought, oh, they were waiting, their whole group was waiting for us. We get in there about an hour late, and they have lined the street, their members had lined the street waiting for us, hadn't they? And it was like, oh, my land. You know, I guess, you know, they were such great hosts. And they were the ones that told us we had felt forgotten in AAW. They were hardworking, they just hadn't had that opportunity to come and participate in anything else. But they certainly appreciated being recognized and us stopping, and appreciated the newsletters and things like that. So we have many, many people out there that we can still reach out to, and I encourage you to do that. So I did make it back to Maine, and Maine hosted our national convention that year, and the big topic at that time was our logo on the pin, the AAW pin. And when it was designed, it was a wonderful logo. It's got a great history, but as time goes on, everybody understands the marijuana issue that we had back during that time. So there have been several discussions of what we should do, what design we should do, and one did get approved for that. And I've actually fought hard for that. I had been, no matter what piece of clothing with our logo on, someone said, so, you work in the marijuana industry, do you? And it was totally illegal in Maine at the time. So actually, I had fought hard for that. I appreciated the support to change that over. And guess what? Maine votes it legal, and it's we're going down the tubes real fast. But anyway, I just want to thank you for that opportunity to represent you, and I thank you for all the support that everyone has given each and every one of the ones that have had this position. It's not an easy position, but I don't think any of us could be successful going through that without the support of each and every one of you. So thank you very much.
Our next president was Doris Mold from Minnesota Agri-Women, and Doris has done so much in our organization for mentoring and networking, and also being involved with collegiate women, and started Collegiate Agri-Women. And Doris was recently recognized as the award winner for this year's top advocate for agriculture and dairy in Minnesota from the Minnesota Milk Producers Association. So she's just been such a great advocate and educator with a great education facility at the Minnesota State Fair for dairy. Following that was Carolyn Zern. Carolyn has been such a so involved in the issues, you know, the commodity issues, and she was issues chair. And her health has not been that great lately, but she's doing okay and sends her best regards. And then, of course, our immediate past president is Heather Hampton Nodal. And we all want to keep Heather and her family in our prayers. And so there are 4 presidents who've passed. It's Ruby Ringstorff, Carolyn Levins, Jean Mertz, and Trina Grabowski. And then, of course, keeping Heather and her family in our prayers, we thought we'd have a moment of silence. And really we have so many other members of those first members we've lost over the years too. Pat?
Chris, I just want to report, we got a text message this morning that Heather got a message from one of Brian's doctors that they think one of these experimental drugs has been working.
Fantastic. That's great news. That's wonderful news. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Well, we hope that you enjoyed hearing from a lot of our past presidents, and we can appreciate all of our rich history. I don't know what the next 50 years will bring. Maybe it'll be some white glove picketing. I don't think we're too far off. We probably just have to come up with a different name, because we really are true to our roots in what we're doing. And I know that we are stronger together as we advocate for the future of agriculture and the future of one that is certainly worth fighting for. And I cannot think of a better room full of grace and grit to get it done than this one. So thank you.